100% Pure Summer Series 2012, Saturday, March 10th at Silo Park. Thanks to Scootling, Grab a Seat, Bex, Skinny, Silo Sessions, and of course 95 BFM.
At this radio station, we do our utmost to abide by the Broadcasting Standards Authority and their rules and guidelines. If you seriously think we've crossed the line on air, give us a call on 309 4831 and tell us about it. We'll be able to help you out and tell you the procedure if you wish to make a formal complaint to the Broadcasting Standards Authority. Fuck knuckles, cock and piss. Balls. Thank you.
You're listening to the Thursday Wire here on 95 BFM. My name's Will Polla. It's just gone midday.
Oh, here he comes! Hey. Minister!
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 How are you? Minister! Answer! Well, how's your wife?
Answer the question, Minister!
Counter-Clockwise, thanks to scoop.co.nz.
Good afternoon, Selwyn.
Yeah, good afternoon, Will. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Oh, not too bad.
Not too bad. Now, it's been a very interesting week, or last day or so, we could say, particularly in relation to the Ports of Auckland industrial dispute. It seems the Ports Company has had enough, and it said, that's it, said goodbye to its union workers, and if they want to come back and work at the port, they're going to have to reapply for their jobs. So is this the end of the dispute as you see it, Selwyn, or is this the start of the next phase?
Well, it certainly has kicked in a new phase, probably albeit not planned for the employers down at the wharf. I see that what the ports are doing really well, if you look at the big picture, is establishing a Southeast Asia kind of model down here in the ports of Auckland. And that, just to define that quite tightly, it's the casualisation of the workforce, the contracts with service provider kind of companies, etc., etc. So it's a devolution of what we have seen. There's an assurity, obviously, that the workers at the ports have had in the past. Their employment contracts and their deals via the union and the collective bargaining have ensured that they know they're going to get per week basically a certain amount of hours that they'll be able to work, and they can kind of budget themselves. Now, the casualisation move by the employers down at the ports is undermining that assurance, and that's basically, I reckon, it's right at the heart of all of this, Will. But I think we must remember, if I'm right, and if I'm arguing this successful, it'd be interesting to see what your listeners think, that this Asian model, this casualisation of the workforce, instead of having staff, stevedores on staff, the ports management does deals with contractors, other companies, and they then employ their stevedores and staff to do the job. Then, in this kind of country, it's problematic, I think. If we look at, like, in the Asian model, why does that work? Why is it most efficient? And you've got to remember that the ports and also the Prime Minister at different times have kind of alluded to the model that Singapore does, and how successful that is as a counter kind of punch when we're looking at our own one here. But the Asian model, while it has union representation, it's kind of diluted, in my view, to the point that the state and commercial bodies basically control the unions, and in some ways, clearly, if you look into it, there's an era of oppression as well, Will.
It's interesting to think about the state of the unions compared to overseas. It certainly seems like now is a time when you can't read any news bulletin or listen to any news bulletin without hearing about strikes in different places around the country. There's the aged care workers, the firefighters, the meat workers who have been locked out, and now the port workers have been on strike for some time now. It seems like this is a moment for the unions in New Zealand at the moment. And how do you think there's march planned for this weekend? Do you think we're likely to see more kind of general action?
Well, yeah, probably. I think people are getting an idea too now of what the consequence is on families. It's not just the workers down at the ports. We saw news reports last night on 3 News, for example, showing extended interviews on Campbell Live, for example, with the wife of one of the workers who's been so-called made redundant at the ports yesterday, and really personalising what that means for families, the little kids, and all of that type of thing. There's obviously a huge consequence sequence here, but to get to the nut of your question there, right across the country here in New Zealand, I think you're right. You're noticing a difference in people that are in unions saying, well, actually, no, we're not going to accept that. We're going to take this on. And I think it's probably due to many things, and maybe even sociologists would have a view on this, but I think, the national-led government, I'm not saying it's to blame, but it basically represents a particular culture here. It's obviously very supportive of employers. The employers around the country, particularly the big ones like at the ports of Auckland, they pick up those signals and think, right, we're in the in crowd here, the government's very popular, and they start exercising their weight. But here, I think in New Zealand, we do not live in Singapore where it's very strict regulatory regime is represented by the state there. We don't live in China, etc., etc. We're used to here having collective bargaining basically as a right if we choose that. And I think it's a right that is so assumed that when it's rendered irrelevant by employers or there's an air of disregard for collective bargaining, it causes a huge backlash, and that's what we're seeing at the guts of a lot of this at the moment. But I think most significantly, I think the workers down at the ports have awakened a giant, not just in New Zealand, but around the region and even broader. I think you noted off air earlier this morning to me, and it's certainly the case that overnight the Maritime Union of Australia, which is a powerful body, it's highlighted on its front page of its website, this what I would call, boot-kicking move by the Ports of Auckland management. And it's basically saying that its members will stand in solidarity with New Zealand workers. Now, that Maritime Union of Australia is obviously very important to ships that are stocked with goods and freight from the Auckland ports heading to our export kind of stuff, going across to Australia, our biggest trading partner. And if those unions stick to saying we're going to be in solidarity with our union counterparts in Auckland, that's got a huge impact. Clearly what's next in this whole, stack of dominoes is the Australian port workers, the unionised port workers there will say, we are refusing to unload and offload goods from ships that have been loaded in Auckland by either contractors or scab labour. Beyond that, looking a bit further, also over in the United States, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. Now that's a powerful stevedore union right across the United States, and that on those wharves they control these things. They control the wharves. No one really takes them on. They're powerful. Now these guys, they've got on the front page of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union in the United States, leading basically with New Zealand international support pours in for Auckland wharfies. Now these are strong signals coming from all of our major trading partners. This is the west coast of the United States. You're talking San Francisco, you're talking LA, all those ports, big significant, San Diego, etc., that are basically indicating we are going to stand staunch and we're going to stand in solidarity with our Auckland counterparts. I reckon this boss down there at the ports of Auckland has bitten off more than he can chew, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's reined in.
This is interesting because that's the same kind of message that when I spoke to Gary Parslow from the Maritime Union yesterday, he was saying that Gibson down at the ports doesn't really know what he's got himself into, and you're mentioning the kind of support that could be offered by unions in Australia and the US. When I spoke to Richard Pearson, the chairman of Ports of Auckland yesterday, he said he wanted to make note that the kind of action you're mentioning, workers in Australia or the US refusing to unload ships and in solidarity with what's going on at Auckland, the workers there, that would be, those actions would be illegal. And I'm not up to play with the regulations. So
let's take it from a pragmatic point of view. Do you really think that the unions in the United States, or certainly in Australia as well, would be worried about his view on the law? If they've got their unionised workforce that's organised and with their own regulation and their own laws over in those countries that are able to actually stand there and say, this has been loaded by scab labour and we refuse on the principle, and we're allowed to basically resist have that coming off the ship, no one's going to rock that over there. They do not want it exploding into a union versus some sort of free market ideal kind of fight on their shores, those companies clearly, and we've seen history of this through the decades, that they just do not take on that kind of union might. The other thing is from a legal point of view, if those guys down at the ports of Auckland want to wade into that, it'll be interesting to see people who know about this type of thing intimately, like Jane Kelsey and others, to actually give a response on what it means. My understanding, Will, is that there's international labour organisation standards that are potentially in breach here. If you even look at New Zealand's law relating to the Employment Relations Act and the good faith bargaining aspects, that if you know, the definition, for example, of redundancy is basically where, due to whatever condition, a person's job no longer exists. Now, they've indicated yesterday that they've made everyone redundant. Well, that doesn't fall into that definition, does it? You know, what they're doing there is they're saying, we're making you guys redundant and we're going to fill those jobs that are vacant with either scab labour or contracting companies that will then rehire and put people in.
I just wanted, before we run out of time, Sal, and I wanted to touch on another aspect of this, and that is the involvement or lack of involvement in the dispute by both central and local government officials. And something that the union has been saying quite strongly is that they're really disgusted, was their words, with the Mayor, Len Brown, who has in the past, you know, presented him as the workers' mayor. He came from South Auckland and has presented himself as such in the past, but has said not only that he believes he has no scope to intervene in the dispute, but also that the council's decision to ask for a greater dividend is perhaps partly to blame.
Well, you know, you could kind of point the fingers in all sorts of different areas. I think Len Brown's problem there clearly is that he has agreed with the argument that he has a legal constitutional kind of issue to observe there. Len Brown is a lawyer by profession, and I think that's why you see a reticence for him to come out and say what he personally thinks, which is obviously folly for a politician to do so. At the end of the day, would Len Brown be better off to say, as the person representing those who own these ports, we expect and demand that the ports management and the unions settle this, and if they need extra outside help, then we're going to broker that on their behalf. You know, there wouldn't be anything stopping him from saying that. The unfortunate thing is this is such a polarised issue that what it does is anybody that is getting involved with it is put on one side or the other, and there's no middle ground, and what it's leaving is no one able to broker a resolution that is going to benefit those families that we mentioned at the beginning of this bulletin. From the same point of view from those down in central government, down there in Parliament, you know, the Labour Party has members in there that are former union representatives. The Labour Party has been down there working in some ways with the workers and also brokering meetings. And know that David Shearer, for example, has met with just about everybody in this whole dispute, but he hasn't gone public with it. And he was asked last week in a meeting that I think Gordon Campbell is going to be producing in his Werewolf Online magazine, David Shearer's response to that, and it was basically, I think, without preempting Gordon's piece, one where he thought at the end of the day, if he went public on anything, it wouldn't do the issue any good. That they were so polarised, so diverse from getting some common ground, that all it would do was inflame it. Now, that everybody might have a different reason for not getting involved, but what's clear, well, and I think, you know, your program has shown that really well, is the two groups need to have a resolution here. The country needs a resolution. This is going to spill out beyond our borders. If our ships are not getting our export goods to our biggest trading partners, that means all of us suffer at a time when we can't afford to lose money. So somebody's got to get in there and sort it out, and it just seems to me the reactions of the ports of Auckland management yesterday by, in my view, circumnavigating the law and putting out a redundancy kind of boot boy type tactic is counterproductive to everybody's interests.
Well, we'll see shortly if they've solved the dispute or opened a can of worms. But thank you for joining us today, Selwyn.
Okay, mate.
We'll talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
It's almost 1:45 here on the Thursday Wire on 95 BFM. Back after this.
'Tis time again for AUSA's infamous Outdoor Summer Shakespeare. March the 3rd till the 24th, Much Ado About Nothing will be splitting your sides and setting your heart aflutter like only Bill Shakespeare's comedy canst. This is the 49th Summer Shakespeare show of its kind, so come join the bard, the lovers, the soldiers and the band with Much Ado About Nothing, directed by Sam Pascoe and starring the delightful Jess Bates, Chris Bryan and more. Tickets only $18 for students and $25 for adults from maidment.auckland.ac.nz.
95 BFM